I'd like to show you the difference between the stringed instruments that we play today and the kind of stringed instruments that Bach would have been familiar with in his own time. Here on this table, I have two violins, and I wish I could say simply one is the old one is the new one, but it isn't quite that easy. To my left is my own Stradivarius, truly an old instrument, a valuable antique, made in 1720 in Italy by Antonio Stradivari, and that was a very good year. It was in 1720 that Bach wrote his glorious sonatas and partitas for unaccompanied violin. But this violin has been greatly updated and modernized to make it more powerful and more brilliant. To my right is a new instrument made in 1984 by Douglas Cox in Putney, Vermont, but it was made specifically to match the instruments that Bach would have known with all the measurements and angles that he would have been familiar with. The easiest way to describe the difference between these two violins is to compare them to an old tennis racket and a new one. The more powerful models have been stretched ever tighter with materials that can take that tighter stretch. On this Douglas Cox violin, you can see that the neck comes out of the body at a very straight angle, showing that it has not been stretched back very far. The strings were made of gut in Bach's time, the fingerboard was short, the bridge was low, and there was no chin rest of any kind. In comparison, my Stradivarius has been stretched tighter, and you can see that in the angle of the neck, which goes all the way back. And the strings themselves are now made out of much more resistant materials and coated with metal of some sort to make them longer lasting. But the sound isn't as sweet. Let me let you hear it for yourself and see what you think of the difference. First of all, the pitch of this violin is an A 440, as we call it. This one, almost a half step lower. First, the brilliant Stradivari in the D minor saraband of Bach. It's a very easy instrument to play. I know that it will carry in the largest hall to an audience of 3,000 or 4,000 people. But because it carries so well, it's rather rough and harsh compared to the sweetness of sound that you're about to hear at a lower pitch on this old instrument. Clearly, the modern instrument gave up something to get its power. In the next segment, it will be the last of Bach's life that you'll learn about. How he came to terms with leaving a legacy to the future, and perhaps even sensed that it would be many generations before people would really appreciate the greatness of his art. In the year 1750, just before the death of Johann Sebastian Bach, there was a book printed up that had some of the leading citizens of Leipzig in it, a kind of a who's who of the city of Leipzig. Bach's name was not found there. It was a year later, after he had died, the book was updated, And then you found the name Johann Sebastian Bach. Well, you say, how typical. It's always that way. You're not really recognized until you die. Bach was recognized in a way, but that recognition was modest. I'm sure that the parishioners who went to the Thomas Church regularly appreciated his art. I'm sure that the town council felt that he had acquitted himself with distinction in the tasks that he had been given, and he had enriched many other parts of the city as well. But it was still a modest recognition compared to the enormous genius of the man.